Hello, and welcome to Creating Space in Conversation with. My name is Ingrid Pope, and I'm the founder of Creating Space. Our mission is to declutter the world of everything that gets in our way of being effective, of making good decisions, of being focused. Today, we will be talking about really what I almost consider the ultimate in decluttering, which is mindfulness. I'm delighted to be conversing with Sue Cruse, who is a coach, a therapist, and also a mindfulness teacher. And there's so much that we can learn from her. Hello, Sue. It's wonderful, wonderful to be conversing with you today. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you.
So I was very keen to record a conversation with you because our paths crossed in the realm of mindfulness. And I thought that was that there was really quite a clear link with all the stuff that I'm doing. And I just wanted to explore that a little bit with you today.
Great. Yeah.
And so just out of curiosity, how did you come to mindfulness? How did mindfulness become a part of your life?
Yeah. It's an interesting question for me to reflect on, actually. So first, I think meditation came very young in my life. I started yoga in my mid-teens, and so meditation came in. And then I trained in a psychology as a psychotherapist, where we use a lot of meditation. So again, meditation was there. And then mindfulness I began to become aware of mindfulness in terms of the movement that Jon Kabat-Zinn began, really. And he's often described as the father of Western or modern mindfulness. And he wrote a very significant book about mindfulness called Full Catastrophe Living. And that was back in 1996. And so it was soon after that mindfulness came to me. And the way it came to me was actually through my professional life. I was working in a very large corporate, and I was tasked, I was working what people would largely call the occupational health department, but I was working at the end of the department, which was non-clinical. And my remit was keep the healthy people healthy. And I spent a long time developing a strategy and ways of doing that. And as I was working on that, I thought, well, obviously we need to keep them physically healthy. You know, we need to keep them emotionally and mentally healthy, even spiritually healthy in the sense of having a life with meaning and purpose. And worked on that really hard and really well, actually. And noticed that recovery was an area where the working population just doesn't do well, especially if people are excited by their work, successful, well rewarded for their work. Then that type of passion can drive a life which is fully on, no stopping, no breaks. And that, of course, leads to lack of recovery, tiredness, really, and overwhelm. And finally, I kind of pieced together these things that have been floating around me. And I thought, it's mindfulness. I need to find out more. Maybe this is the answer, or part of the answer. And so I went off and did some reading. I was fortunate enough, I used to go to the US a lot. And where mindfulness started in the US was in cardiac rehabilitation.
Really?
And I never forget getting off a plane in the afternoon and going straight to a cardiac rehabilitation group and joining a mindfulness class. realizing that this was bringing something to these people who could be very anxious. They'd all had heart attacks. And I found the atmosphere so still, so calm. And I was very curious. So I did reading, I did training, I became a teacher of mindfulness. And with a colleague introduced it to that organisation as well. Which I don't take the credit now, but it's hugely present within that organisation now.
It's a really interesting story, and there is still a part of me somewhere that feels that there is quite a hurdle to perhaps get crossover to accept mindfulness within a busy organization.
Yeah.
And how does that fit?
Yeah. Certainly not by coming in evangelical about mindfulness, because obviously there are associations with mindfulness, which there were more so probably 15, 20 years ago, which was that it was Buddhist, that it had some kind of, let's say, philosophical or religious roots, which it does indeed, but that you had to somehow become somebody who sits cross-legged, and people would reject that because it wouldn't fit with the corporate image. I tell you how I believe the willingness to it and the openness to it starts in most people, and that is with pain. And by that I mean that people come to a point where they feel, I don't know how I'm going to go on. I feel overwhelmed. I feel stretched too thin. Maybe I need to leave. Maybe a crisis happens back in the home where a primary relationship, which has become maybe a little bit taken for granted, begins to creak under the strain of all the attention on the job. So I think there has to be some pain. And then people say, how can I help myself? Or what is there out there that I can do differently, or I can learn? Where's the help? And, I work as a coach, primarily as a coach now, both in organisations, but also as a life coach. And I would say that I use mindfulness in all of my work. And what brings people to me is usually pain. They want to develop, and, they want to grow. And so there's always a hope and, a very positive outcome that is aimed for. But there's something that's not working that brings them.
And that sounds familiar, if we only go and looking for answers if we feel we have a problem at some level. And I'm also curious about the piece around recovery. You were talking earlier about really noticing that the recovery was a problem in people. And I wonder how mindfulness can help with that.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that with recovery, people don't recover if they are constantly connected to the past or to the future. Now, what do I mean by that? Constantly connected to the past, where people may be ruminating over something that happened in the past and feeling, I don't know, disappointed or injured or something that didn't really go well for them. There's, and I think I say for them, but it's for me, for all of us. So that tendency to ruminate or to review. And so we can get caught in the past. We can also get very caught up in the future, which can be needing to mitigate against certain risks, anxieties or fears about the future, whatever that happens to be. Now, do we need the past and the future in our field of vision? Yes. But if it's center stage, if it's right center, fore and center, then there's no room for the present. And this is a case of overload. So what I would say that mindfulness does is it opens the field of vision to make space to live now, to focus now. I mean, I often think how, how many, when I was in the corporate space as a leader, how many times I've turned up to a meeting and there were 6 bodies there, however many bodies there, the bodies were there, but no one had arrived in the meeting because the minds were elsewhere or the emotions were elsewhere. So how much our efficiency is reduced, our relationships are damaged, and our own well-being is impacted if we're not present. Because if we're not present, we will be needing to rework so much in our lives. Maybe our work, maybe our relationships. We're always trying to make it right again. So mindfulness brings us to present moment living. And it feels quite spacious.
And of course,
yeah.
In my head, I have, decluttering that line of vision a little bit, just in terms of my terminology, and and you're saying, creating that space to be there.
Yeah, to be there.
Yeah.
To be there, and as you say, like, to use the cluttering language, but to be there without the chatter in the mind, which is really mind clutter. So the chatter in the mind might be about something out there, but it might even be something here. She looked at me in a particular way, the tone of her voice, I said something and I'm not sure it landed well. And then the chatter starts up. The feelings are always associated. Whereas if we can be fully present, we can be curious, not afraid, and compassionate to ourselves and others. And that's much less draining than being in a space with all this stuff going on and these feelings going on. And did I answer the question about recovery? I wonder.
I think so, and maybe this next question will lead into that. I wonder, as we close our conversation, what might be a top tip for someone who is in that overwhelmed space and that constantly on space, especially nowadays when even that break, that commute between work and home is like stepping through a door or going up a staircase. And what can people do?
Yeah. So what I would suggest, maybe 1 or 2 things, but aim to live a life where you spend time fully on and then fully off. So it's about oscillating, because in the fully off comes the recovery. In the fully on, we can perform to our highest in anything that matters to us, friendships, anything, parenting, anything. But we can only do that if we know the place of fully off. Fully on, fully off. It's like an oscillation. And mindfulness, if we can practice some mindfulness, in our whatever suits us in our life, we will know what that fully off space, what takes us to the fully off space. So it might be before a meeting when we want to be fully present, that we spend time, and it can be even the brief time in the restroom, switching fully off, breathing. But fully off can equally be preparing some food with full attention, drinking a cup of tea with no distraction. And that takes us to a place of recovery, and then prepares the state for full presence. The other thing that I would suggest is, when we want to be fully present, we must be aware that the mind is so busy, all of our minds are so busy, that we must be willing to try to adopt an attitude of curiosity in whatever situation we're in, knowing the mind will wander, and gently bringing it back over and over and over again. Never wasting energy when the mind wanders off going, oh my God, there I go again. That's just me. I can't do this stuff. No, no, no. There's the mind. And we can do that by saying, oh, there are the kids. There's my boss. There's the fear. There's the anticipation. There's the regret. And here I am. So every time we just bring ourselves back over and over again. And you know what I find sometimes is we can have a body position which reminds us of that. So for me, it would be leaning in, not leaning out, because leaning out is everywhere else. I'm sort of here with you, but I'm sort of everywhere else. Leaning in, I'm with you. I mean, there are many other things, of course. But...
Yes. Now, those are really useful and very practical tips. I think you've touched on it also, this, how a lot of people think of or worry about, well, this isn't for me. I can't keep my mind focused on, whatever it is, meditation, mindfulness, one thing, my mind keeps wandering. And that's normal, and that's okay. And that's exactly what this is all about.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's also where people might struggle to switch off, as you say, because they feel like the mind is just going, and how do they switch off? And it's great to see that there are tools and things that people can do. And we use the word practice in terms of mindfulness practice, but I also have that word in my head in terms of, well, actually, it's something that needs to be practiced in order to get good at it and be able to do it in a useful way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's about spending time asking yourself, what enables me to go fully off? And then what keeps me in a fully on position? Because for one person, it may be meditating. For another, it may be switching everything off and just drinking a cup of tea, smelling, tasting, feeling. For another, it will be walking around the garden, in nature, along the corridor. So what I think I've come to realize in my relatively long history now with mindfulness is there are many ways to practice, as you say, and it's important to find the one that feels right. And it may seem so simple, so mundane, but remembering we do it intentionally, and the intention is to recover in order to be fully present to what matters most.
Lovely finishing words. I find really this intention, and just being intentioned with what we do, because so often we just go through a number of activities on autopilot and don't really think about them very much. Thank you very much, Sue. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today about mindfulness. And
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it.
wonderful. Thank you. What an interesting conversation. I think Sue might have debunked a few myths around what mindfulness maybe is or is not. And this idea of recovery, we often think about our physical energy and our physical recovery, and we know that we go to sleep at night and we need a certain number of hours in order to get up again the next day and function. But how about this mental recovery and also emotional recovery? So, are you just a body in a room, or do you bring your attention and intention into everything that you do? And also, how do you switch off completely in order to be able to oscillate between being on and fully on and really 100% present, and finding that time to be completely off, to be able to recover? So whether it be cooking, whether it be walking, or maybe gardening, or any other type of activity, what's your off time, truly off time? So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Join me again for more conversations about creating space.